For more on the European mess that's threatening to spill over here in the States, I'm joined by Dan Mitchell of the Cato Institute. Welcome back to the show, Dan. Great to have you here. So is austerity now a dirty word?
Austerity is always a dirty word with politicians if they define it as controlling government spending. Now, austerity in Europe usually just means higher taxes, but here's the dirty little secret the establishment media doesn't want people to know. Sarkozy was a big spender. There were no spending cuts in France leading up to before the election. And as a result, to say that this is a backlash against controlling government spending, I'm sorry, that just doesn't match with the facts.
Well, interesting, Dan. And let me tell you, though, Holland is going to introduce spending on steroids. He wants to impose a 75% income tax rate on millionaires, more government programs, more spending. Retirement age goes down, not up. Come on. Where are they headed if they go after this kind of plan, this kind of program only puts them deeper in debt, right?
There's no question Hollande is a crazy left-winger. If he does a 75% top tax rate, you better believe a lot of French entrepreneurs and investors are going to be escaping to Switzerland and London and every place in between. But Sarkozy was a big government statist. Hollande is a big government statist. I feel sorry for the voters of France. This was the country that gave us Bastiat and Jean-Baptiste Say and other great economists throughout the years. And now their entire political culture is about the most big government group you could possibly imagine. And so there's been no austerity, but that's what they need, is they need to get government spending under control. Hollande it's jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
Jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. That's a good way to put it. Let's talk about the impact on the Eurozone for just a second here, because I've got to think that at the end of the day, the Eurozone, given what's happened in France, given what's happened in Greece, given what's happened in Germany overnight, it's in danger, right? I mean, this thing could fall apart.
I think the Greek election results are really the key that should worry people, because you have a whole bunch of splinter parties, a whole bunch of crazy people. Some news story says the anti-bailout parties won. No, they're all in favor of bailouts. They're just not in favor of doing anything in exchange for mooching off German taxpayers, for mooching off American taxpayers. So I suspect that the Greeks are going to have a hard time forming a government. If they do form a government, they're going to want to renegotiate their bailout, get more money in exchange for doing nothing. And at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to see where that leads other than to Greece pulling out of the euro. And I think that might, in effect, start a whole ball of the whole ball unraveling, with Portugal and Spain and maybe even Italy following at some point. And let's not forget, Belgium and France are going to hit their fiscal crisis sometime in the next few years.
I'm smiling, but it's really very sad. Let's take a look at European debt. We have a full screen here I want to show you. So many countries there with debt that's very nearly equal to the output of their entire economy. Look at Italy, 121% of their GDP is debt. It's frightening, and it seems to me the only way out of this is by tightening their belt a little bit and not borrowing from the future. Is there any other way out of that? And answer this for me, if you will, because one of the criticisms that I've heard today is that there's no plan for growth.
I think that's critical. If you go back in our history, at the end of World War II, we actually had government debt of 125% of GDP in America, and yet we managed to grow our way out of it. The key thing is that instead of austerity being defined as higher taxes, or Keynesianism defined as higher spending, which are the two bad choices the Europeans are looking at, the Europeans need to cut government spending and lower tax rates. Get that combination of less wasteful spending with some pro-growth tax policy, shrink the burden of government, and then they can begin to grow out from under their debt with just a little bit of fiscal discipline. It's not difficult to achieve what has to be done, but the political elite in Europe is so completely statist, so completely in love with big government. The only countries that have done it right, nobody's ever heard of: Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. The Baltic countries cut government spending significantly.
Right.
It was like taking a Band-Aid off quickly. It hurt, but now they're growing again. They're showing the way to go.
And that's a significant example, I think, out there for most of Europe. But I got to tell you, I look at the programs that this new socialist president is backing, and to me, it feels like they put Paul Krugman in charge of the country. The New York Times columnist who said today that, wow, we need more spending. Spending is critical. Respond to that. He says that these countries need to spend to make everybody feel whole, to make the economy grow again. Why is that not true?
It's not true, because it's the old Keynesian theory that you take money out of the economy's left pocket, put it in the economy's right pocket, and magically you think that you're richer. It just doesn't work. It didn't work for Hoover and Roosevelt in the 30s. It didn't work for Japan in the 1990s. It didn't work for Bush in 2008, and it didn't work for Obama in 2009. But it's not just bad theory. Krugman is getting the facts wrong. He criticized the UK government for having austerity. They've never cut a single penny. Now he's criticizing Sarkozy for austerity. Sarkozy never cut a single penny, or whatever they would use in France. Government spending in all these countries has been going up. Maybe it's going up by 3% instead of 6%, and in Krugman's mind, that's the same as a spending cut.
All
but
right.
Come on, let's use honest numbers.
Quickly, Dan, we don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to ask you this. Is there any ripple effect for the U.S. here?
If you wind up having the worst case scenario, Greece pulling out of the euro in a very haphazard fashion, defaulting on debt that all these banks own, and then these European banks go underwater, yes, you can begin, and then of course it spreads to Spain and Portugal and Italy. You can create a very negative scenario where you have something vaguely akin to 2008 happening all over again. I would hope American banks, though, have spent the last few years making sure that they don't have much exposure to this dodgy European government debt. If they haven't, then they deserve what they get.
Been a lot of warning signs along the way. Dan, thanks for coming on the show tonight. It's always great to have you on. Come back soon.